One, welcome, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. My name is Tyler Ferdinand. I know many of you on the call, but there's definitely a lot of new faces as well. And I'm going to be the moderator, but I'm going to put that in air quotes for today because I'm going to be part of the discussion as well for this session on innovation in the blue and green economies. So before we start, as per usual, just some quick housekeeping. Our session will be approximately 1 hour. The style is going to be kind of a fireside chat. So I'll provide some guiding questions, but really encourage free flow and engagement between the speakers. And hopefully they'll emphasize a lot of stories and some concrete examples from the field. And I guess my job will be to try to get us back on track if things go a little bit too sideways. Please be active in the chat in terms of the audience. So questions and comments are very welcome, and we will try our best to incorporate them throughout the session. So Carmen and Hannah, who are also helping out today, are going to try to pull some questions from the chat. Please keep yourself on mute if possible. And as you've probably already seen, today's webinar is going to be recorded. So a link to the recording will be shared after the event. And we're recording this session for those that were unable to attend today. That's it for housekeeping. I also wanted to thank all of our partners and supporters, including CFAR members that are here today. For those that aren't familiar with the CFAR Alliance, CFAR stands for Climate Innovations for Adaptation and Resilience Alliance. And the Alliance aims to strengthen the ecosystem for inclusive innovation and climate action for the equitable betterment of people, the planet, and prosperity for all. And the way that the Alliance does this is by helping to increase collective knowledge and expertise through webinars like this, catalyzing partnerships, and also enabling brave innovators to grow, replicate, and scale for impact. And on that last note, today's CFAR Brown Bag is brought to you by the TECA program. So the TECA program is the Triggering Exponential Climate Action Program, which is a climate venture launcher operating in Africa and also very recently in Latin America, which I'm proud to say, and is hosted by BFA Global and co-implemented with a lot of our great partners, many of which are on the call. And TECA helps entrepreneurs passionate about the environment and climate build climate leadership, also form new companies, and also bring ideas to functional prototypes. So just as a really brief overview for the fireside chat, the purpose of the chat is to discuss climate innovation in the green and blue economies in Africa and engage the CFAR and greater community to see how they can support the entrepreneurs that we're all working with. And some of the key objectives are to identify the trends, opportunities, gaps, and support mechanisms for these entrepreneurs. So without further ado, I'll introduce our fireside chatters today. I've already started with a little bit of an introduction, but my name is Tyler Ferdinand. As I was saying a little bit earlier, if you heard, I'm newly based in Madrid, Spain, and I'm the Deputy Director of the TECA program at BFA Global. We're also joined by the lovely Mary Kashingaki, who is based in Nairobi, Kenya, and works for FSD Africa, a specialized development organization working to make African financial systems work for people and the planet. And she has been collaborating very closely with the TECA team since its inception. We're also joined by Hital Patel, who is also based in Nairobi and is the Director of Investments for Mercy Corps Ventures, which is an early stage impact investor focused on the thematic areas of inclusive fintech, agriculture and food systems, and climate smart technologies. And then last but not least, we're joined by Thando Mazumba, who is based in Cape Town, South Africa, one of my most favorite places in the world, and is the venture development lead for Ocean Hub Africa, an African-based accelerator for the blue economy and one of our main partners for the current TECA wave. And I already said it, but she just got confirmation for her management practice degree at the UCT Graduate School of Business today. So big congrats to Thando. This just happened this morning. So just to wrap up the intro, I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about the green and blue economies. And so I'm going to provide some general definitions. I'm sure that others have maybe better ones or different ones. But when we're talking about the green economy in Africa and beyond, this focuses on sustainable development that reduces environmental and climate risks. And some example sectors might include sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, sustainable urban development, conservation and restoration, amongst many others. I'm sure you can think of some more. On the other hand, we have the blue economy, which focuses on sustainable use of ocean and coastal resources. And some example sectors include sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, marine and coastal tourism, marine biotech, ocean renewable energy, transport and shipping, et cetera. And again, I'm sure you could think of some other ones as well. For both of these economies, the goal, at least in my opinion, is to build climate resilience, protect and enhance biodiversity, reduce carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions, and all doing this while promoting sustainable livelihoods and creating jobs or improving jobs. And so when we're talking about innovation within these economies, this refers to the development and implementation of new technologies, practices, and business models that promote sustainable development in these economies while also reducing environmental and climate impact. So I think with all of that, that's enough context setting. And I'd like to just jump right into the fireside chat. So I'd like to cover, first of all, the trends and opportunities in climate innovation. And so to add some context and texture, let's start by sharing some insights into innovative solutions and some related business models that we've seen recently. And I was thinking maybe, Hital, you could start us off with describing how Mercy Corps Ventures is working with green economy innovators and some green economy companies that you've been working with recently that have really gotten you energized or jazzed.
Sure. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing to recognize is green economy has a broad amount of categories and kind of areas or subsectors. And so we work in a decent amount of those, but not necessarily all of those, although they're all quite interesting. A lot of our focus is around sustainable and precision agriculture and food systems, or at least in that one thematic area, and ensuring that that has a pretty good intersection with livelihood. So kind of where the sweet spot you described in terms of solutions we look for. So under precision ag, the one thing that's exciting us lately is really looking at post-harvest loss. We're also looking at irrigation. We're looking at soil sensor. So really getting that next level beyond, let's say, market linkage and beyond information to how do you really get the information, but also the behavior change at the production level that actually incentivizes farmers and others to behave and change, that will then create more sustainable supply chains and food systems, and then be able, along the way, all of them being able to actually capture the benefits of those changes. What's happened in the past has been the challenge that people don't necessarily get the benefits. The benefits kind of stay across a certain very small slice of the food system or the market system, and then people lose trust on why they should have behavior change.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I'm actually going to probably circle back to that later in one of the different sections where we're going to touch on. But I'm curious across precision ag, post-harvest loss, and others, what kind of, I guess, tech innovations are you really excited about in terms of how they might be incorporating some different new tech?
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing, and for us, we've always tried to, as Mercy Corps Ventures, we have the flexibility to take risk, and that's kind of part of our ethos, and to catalyze others coming in, whether it's others impact investors or other commercial investors. And so really, we've been at the cutting edge of trying to in emerging tech, so AI, satellite, GIS, and how these can be utilized to evolve what would have been tough business models or not possibilities. One example, very specific, is sensorless irrigation. We've just finished an investment in sensorless irrigation. The company is called Sebex. They're out of Tunisia. They're looking to work much deeper in sub-Saharan Africa. This is not an easy thing, but it's actually the path to scale for irrigation advisory. Any other path would require a sensor. Sensors will probably not drop below $100. So it's very tough for smallholder farmers for a variety of reasons, including distribution, maintenance, plus just affordability. And so to be able to test a solution that doesn't require a sensor is super exciting. Will it work? I mean, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, but that's what early stage startups are. But yeah, they're using a combination of satellite, GIS, proprietary data sets that exist in these markets, but probably need to be evolved or cleaned or harmonized, and then using AI to really keep training their model. So I think that's a very specific example where you have emerging tech and data really giving you a solution that's quite climate tech forward.
Okay, really cool. Sensorless irrigation. I don't know if I've actually heard that term before, but I think I get it. It's you don't have some type of hardware on the ground. Rather you're using kind of stuff from the sky.
Yeah, if you don't have hardware on the ground, it usually becomes hard to be accurate enough for people to actually utilize your service. But to put hardware on the ground means you need vertical integration, which means you're going to commercial farms or mid-sized farmers, so smallholder farmers aren't getting the benefits. And Central Irrigation Advisory is basically being able to use these advice to improve, and the hypothesis is up to 13 to 15% of efficiency by how you use water. And so there you have a climate and a livelihoods kind of benefit. And so how the farmer would use water, how they're going to be, and then you can add in, how would you use your soil? How would you, what soil do you have? Start having the partners that are close to the last 2 miles, whether it's agrovets, whether there's the off takers or others, be able to be part of that solution. And that's how we really think about that food systems investing.
Okay, really cool. And maybe continuing with water, but getting a little bit saltier. Maybe we could ask Tando the same question. Hital's given some great examples about what he's excited about for innovations in related tech. What are you seeing in the blue economy, and what's really getting you excited?
Yeah, thanks for the slightly saltier question. It's Tyler. Um, yeah, so I mean, a lot of our fellows, we're familiar with you guys. We've been with you guys with Tekka, so I won't get into the nuts and bolts of OHA because you guys are fully aware of where we're at and what we're due. But to touch on, because of our core sort of offering has been up until now our acceleration program, and so we've seen a lot of really cool innovations come through that. When we look at blue economy, and I'll make this maybe this point a little bit later, but when we look at blue economy, I think it's important to recognize that it's quite an early sector when we compare it to something like the oceans economy within the green economy, which is what we normally operate in. And so the innovations are quite new, and they're also quite time bound in the sense that we're facing climate change now, and so we need solutions now. So as Hital has said as well, it's new, it's very new things that need to be tested out, that need a lot of prototyping, which is why these programs such as like Tekka, supported by BFA and FSD, are so important. But we're really excited about some of them. And if I had to give like a broader term to maybe like four spaces of innovation we're particularly interested in, it would be, of course, blue foods, so sustainable blue sort of consumption. And that's looking at, throughout the value chain, what does it look like to make this process a little bit more sustainable and more impactful to coastal communities? We have some really cool startups that are looking at cold chain storage, which you guys are familiar with. But within that, you could set up a lovely big cold chain storage, but then it's not accessible to some communities. So then how do you make that even more successful? Do you make it instead of a buying process, do you make it a leasing process? We've seen some of that. Do we make it a leasing and mobile? Some people have taken on the models of maybe more Airbnb type of a vibe in terms of that. So within one innovation, which has come up quite recently, we're quite excited that, new innovations within that innovation are already coming out, which is really, really cool. So that's like blue foods. And then we also, there's other sort of innovations within that. Another big term would be, solutions to pollutions. And I think the buzzword around pollution has always been plastic for a good reason. We're really facing some struggles there. But I think it's also important to look at innovations around chemical pollution, around biological pollution, noise pollution. When we look at coral reefs, for instance, and looking at their health, what kind of pollutions are affecting coral reefs? And are we, monitoring the health of coral reefs in a more appropriate manner? Is it spanning, that spatiotemporal, the big span of the coral reefs and over time? What are some low-tech innovations around that? And we've seen some good examples there. We have a startup called Reef Pulse, which is looking at acoustic monitoring of coral reefs. That's super cool. Another one would be low carbonization, some infrastructure, which is, Tyler, you mentioned in the intro. And a really cool one, which you guys actually all know already from your How I Launched series, is from Matthew. So from Bravefoil, which was looking at biomimicry to further efficientize. I'm going to lose that word. Make more efficient. I'm going to use the longer three terms of wind turbines to essentially decrease the drag and to create cleaner energy, and sort of go towards sort of like better, cleaner infrastructure. And I've flipped the two now that I'm speaking about it, but the last one would be renewables and cleaner energy. So those are the four, if I had to say. So renewables or cleaner energy, low carbonization, infrastructure, pollutions, so some solutions around pollutions, and blue foods. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And I was going to summarize, so thank you for doing it for me. This actually just made me think because Hital, you were mentioning some interesting, I guess, would be more high tech solutions, right? When you're talking about GIS, satellite imagery, etc. And then also, Tando, you've mentioned the fact that the blue economy is a much more is a newer innovation space. And from the TECA program in wave one, we focus on the blue economy. In the second wave, we're focusing on the blue economy plus regenerative landscape, so green economy. And what I've noticed is that there was, especially in the first blue economy wave, a lot of gnawing at the bit to start to integrate some of these high-tech solutions, whether that's blockchain, Web3 solutions, satellite imagery, et cetera. But what we kind of tried to do is put a little bit of a pause on that, or a brake pedal a little bit, because we want to start with maybe low-tech solutions first to make sure that it makes sense. So I'm wondering if Hital or Tando, in terms of the level of tech, if you're seeing kind of a difference in terms of application, is the green economy just readier for some of these higher tech applications because it's been more of an active innovation space up to this point? Just food for thought. What are you guys thinking?
Oh, thanks, Hital. Yeah, I can't, I'm not going to try speak for the green economy. I'm going to let Hital go ahead there for sure, um, or someone else. But I think for us at OHA, especially, we're looking at both. We're looking at what is going to work in the high tech space for a certain type of community and what is going to work in the low tech space. And we've particularly seen that the low tech is more tangible, or it can be applied a little bit more in really small coastal communities. And so actually how we're working with Tech and you guys is that we're building a venture building vertical alongside our accelerator program, because we're noticing that in some communities, maybe there's a low tech solution that is needed that can be spanned across many types of African communities. And so it's not necessarily to scale the business at a local community sort of level, but to see if there is a low tech innovation that can help multiple communities across Africa. And this requires us to go through some, for lack of a better term, market research in terms of understanding what is the golden thread or the golden pain point that coastal communities are facing in terms of building adaptation and resilience to a changing environment. And a lot of those are quite low tech. They don't need much. They're not trying to scale their businesses. They're not trying to, take over the market. They're just trying to adapt to changing sea surface temperature waters, or changing tides. That's all they're trying to do and survive and put food on the plate and have their families thrive. So we're seeing a lot of low tech is actually very useful for the blue economy. But again, because the ocean's economy is so large, there is opportunity for high tech as well. It just depends on who we're applying it to. So that's what I'll say about the blue economy.
Cool. Thank you, Tando. And Hital, from your viewpoint, how are you guys approaching low versus high tech?
I think part of what's wrapped up in this question is, what is your mandate as an investor, right? If I'm speaking as an investor. So I think it depends on what roles one is taking in the ecosystem and what your mandate is and what your objective is to accomplish. And so for us as a early stage tech enabled or tech forward investor, we do look for tech. And as Tando said, one of the words that she uses is scale. And it's something that comes up in a market where density is low, infrastructure is still difficult in terms of digital infrastructure, et cetera. We need to be able to utilize, we look for solutions that utilize all the different technologies to try to bridge that gap, kind of achieve what this magical word scale is. At the same time, I think doesn't mean low tech is not useful. It's the exact opposite. I think it means that who or what type of investor or vehicle is fit for rightly deploying low tech, right? For what solution and for what money that they're raising from. So if it's all correctly aligned, then there isn't as much disappointment, and the pressure doesn't go on the communities or the founders to kind of make a successful solution out of something that may not be correctly have designed. I.e., if a VC is trying to invest in a blue economy low tech solution, and then you go to that founder and say, "Why aren't you giving me scale?" That's not, I would not be doing my job correctly. And so we are very careful that, we acknowledge that we have to define what VC means for Africa. It shouldn't mean what it means for, especially for Silicon Valley. Let's leave that out. It's a different discussion and webinar. But what is going to mean? What are exits going to mean? And have correct expectations with funders. And then what is that going to mean in terms of the how and the types of sustainable business models that founders can try to create and that work for the consumers. And some of those are going to be low tech. Some of those are going to have CapEx with tech, right? It could be that I'm looking at another solution now that where it's a green economy, but they're involving a small piece of CapEx in soil sensors. And they're using soil sensors, but AI, right? To be able to have deeper analytics exactly in what you should be using and how. Now, in my mind, you combine that with my irrigation without a sensor, and now I have a pretty deep solution for farmers in the green economy, right? You have a stack of solutions. Now, those are combined tech and a little bit of hardware, but they use tech. Whereas low tech could be more, as Thando was describing, that they're very immediate. They give people immediate solutions. They're accessible, and they can be implemented right away. They're not a VC type where it's going to really start showing its results in year 3, 4, 5. So I think the key difference is what is right fit for the solution one's building.
And I think I'm getting a sense that maybe Mary wants to jump in on that question or on that point. And I was just about to get to you, Mary, because you have a great overview, right, of what's happening in all the different emerging markets and the technologies that you guys are invested in as FSDA. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, sure. No, I was actually going to ask Hetal a follow-up because I know that Tyler and Thando, you're in the very, very, very early stages of tech. And I guess that has an impact also on the kinds of support and the tech you're seeing. So I was going to ask Hetal, at what stage is MCB kind of looking at supporting the ventures that they're supporting or investing in? Yeah, those ventures.
Well, I think so we're quite early stage investment, right? And so we're very open to investing around an MVP. I mean, we'd like to see some sort of testing of traction just to understand how the market reacts to the product. But we will be taking that early stage risks where even other early stage investors may want a bit of more traction or some revenue. What we do balance is what is that product and why are we going in earlier? Is it because we could have an opportunity to help? And this is the second part of your question, which is we are quite involved and we have a pretty robust post-investment platform, which helps from everything from really product design, customer segmentation, and insights, which are, I think, two things that really help accelerate from MVP-ish to really being able to have, post-revenue. And then impact, thinking about where you can utilize your impact metrics and discipline to bring in grants that can help you test new products or market expansion. Because again, if we're talking about, cutting edge really difficult problem sets, utilizing cutting edge technology or even low tech, but still cutting edge business models, you want to be able to use all the different capital that could be available for that founder to kind of piece together. So especially for market expansion, for product testing, we think grants can be a really good utilization. We think early stage concessionary debt is needed more because that can help people test a bit more working capital and give some flexibility without having to just rely on the equity market, which is just quite depressed right now. So I think there's a combination. But for TA, yeah, we really are quite hands-on and there from right around due diligence when we know it's probably going to pass, through post-investment until the next round and far.
That's great. Maybe just to come back to you, Mary, taking it from the focus on the innovations in the companies and maybe bringing it now to the entrepreneurs, right? So the actual people behind the magic. I'm curious about what programs and initiatives does FSDA have in place to support entrepreneurs, and why has FSDA been motivated to do so?
Okay, so I'll start with the motivation, which is what FSD Africa is about, which is about financial sector development. So it's about trying to support development of financial markets across Africa to be able to have better outcomes for the environment and for people. And so we've taken, we call it the continuum of capital. So from that very early stage, investment in innovation to much later stage mobilization of capital at the capital markets level, the green bonds and so on. And when it comes to the early stage, we've been supporting entrepreneurs in various ways. We mainly work through intermediaries like Catalyst Fund and other funds that we've invested in. But we also have started a few different kinds of programs, like the ones that we're working on with TECA, trying to support the seeding of these innovations at the very early stage. So over the last year, we've kind of taken an interest in 3 major growth areas for us. That's carbon market development, nature and biodiversity preservation, and the just energy transition. And I think blue and green do touch a lot heavily on that when you think about innovation. And we know that a lot of innovation needs to happen at the really early stage. I think like Thando, you said, some of these are really, really new areas that we need to think about. So that's the motivation we have behind the support and some of the programs that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you called it the capital continuum. Was that what you called it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We call it loosely that.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's thinking about that from seeding and starting in terms of an idea and an innovation to how do you grow, how do you scale, how are you able to have those huge impacts at a transformational level. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I definitely want to get back to this idea of a continuum when we talk about the entrepreneurial journey as well. But just again, going back to the entrepreneurs and the types of needs and support mechanisms that they require, I wanted to return back to your point, Tal, that you talked about earlier with behavioral change. And I was poking around your LinkedIn earlier, which I guess we've discussed, and there's some updates that are required. But I noticed that you focus on the social change and the bridging inequalities piece. And so for that type of social change and that bridging inequalities for entrepreneurs to have that type of impact, that takes time and also capital, right? And so what are kind of the key capital and funding requirements for emerging innovations to have these types of impacts for social change and bridging inequalities?
Yeah, no, it's a pretty loaded question there, Tyler. As I said, I mentioned some of the tools and instruments, right? I think at this basic formula, I don't want to necessarily say that I think social change or inequalities can all come from startups. I'm very, very aware of the different combinations of things that are needed to address some of those things that take a lot to address. I do think social solutions and innovation can lead to people having a lot more agency products and services that they can themselves define kind of the social change or bridging the inequalities that they want to bridge. And that's my ideal versus kind of being top down. And I think for those entrepreneurs who are building those solutions that bring agency or options is really around, as I said, grant, debt, equity, revenue-based financing. So these are all instruments. I mean, it doesn't have to be just about instruments. I think there are also wraparound services that come from the ecosystem, fundraising. I think, recognizing how we can support female entrepreneurs and local entrepreneurs beyond accelerators, incubators, and investment readiness. I think it's time that the industry push itself to get beyond that. We've been doing that for a while, and it's good, it's great, but I think there's something. So what is the next leap? What is more precise beyond that? Are there ways to be, what are the tools that can be more precise? A lot of funds do it for their portfolio. But if you're doing something else that's outside of a portfolio, then how does one do that? Especially for entrepreneurs dealing with climate tech, and livelihoods. How do you be really precise in terms of support beyond just, okay, pitch deck, investment readiness, et cetera? So I think those are all tools that can, help support entrepreneurs or then bring these products and services.
Yeah. And I guess that gets very much to some of the ecosystem gaps, which I definitely want to talk about a little bit more. But before we make that pivot, maybe Thando, giving you a chance to talk about some of this type of technical support and mentorship that you guys are providing for the blue economy companies you're working with.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tyler. And I just want to say to Shamim that I'm busy typing your response to your question on the chat now. So I'm busy, don't worry. I haven't ignored you. But yeah, in terms of our startups, if I focus on the accelerator program and maybe talk through it from beginning to end, we're looking at a wide variety of technical and mentorship support. And it is because, as we've all mentioned already, that the startups need a lot of support at the beginning stages because they're bringing in new innovations. They're not entirely always sure what they're doing. And so besides the finances, they need a lot of mentoring and a lot of support. And at OHA, we, besides focusing on the professional development, we also look at personal development. So within our mentoring, we don't only, have access to us as the OHA team, which can give you a bunch of expertise, which includes an entrepreneur in residence and an engineer in residence, which looks at the technical aspect. We also provide the access to specific types of expertise, be it legal, be it financial, be it getting investor pitch ready as well. And that might not be within our team internally, but we can definitely connect our startups to our wide range of a wide, rich network that we have, which is also a part of the work that we do, because we believe that to do the work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of work to be done in terms of climate change, we need a huge ecosystem to work together and collaborate. So we fully recognize that that's not all going to come from our small team at OHA, that we need to make use of our ecosystem. So we definitely give access to that. We also run an annual Ocean Innovation Africa event, which is co-hosted with Catalyze. And that is a physical event where we're bringing in all these different stakeholders where our fellows through our acceleration program are able to meet. Some of them have made deals in these 2.5 days of meeting, which is really, really wonderful. We also allow them to do their pitching at the end of it. It's a part of their graduation. And so we have people like the Earthshot Prize who are there to give them access, who often ask, what is your biggest barrier? Tell us now. And I loved that that was a conversation we had last year, is every startup, every team in a startup should know what their biggest barrier is. So if an investor asks you, a potential mentor asks you, you're able to say, this is what I need right now to get me to the next step. If you're not able to say that, I would say that you need to focus on that and know. Mm-hmm. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of understanding where you are, and more importantly, where you want to go. And that's why we're all here, right? That's why we're all here to support you. So that's a really cool way of just like physically meeting and engaging with stakeholders. So that's more on the mentoring side. We have 1v1s, we have ad hoc requests of specific needs. We have partners in the legal sector, which allow people to draft co-founder agreements, but also understand some of the policies that might enforce or underpin some of the work that the startups are doing, so they can find ways to work around them if needs be. And then on the technical side, we again have partners with Dassault System and like softwares and management tools, which the startups get access to. And not only just, we don't throw them in the deep end, but we can go through the training and help them understand some of these systems as well. So it's a wide range of support that we give them. And again, as Tal has said, as Mary has said as well, because it's early stage, they really need a wide net of foundation. And that's what we're ready to give them back here in Cape Town. Yep.
That's great. Thanks, Thando. And Hitala, just FYI, you just did it right when I was about to say it. There's a great question in the chat if others want to take a peek as well. But thanks for that. And I want to double click on the ecosystem piece, right? So I think it's really important to understand the gaps that currently exist in the broader ecosystem that hinder these early stage innovators from growing, right? And while we focus a lot on the companies and the entrepreneurs, we also need to invest in the ecosystems they operate in, or essentially we're kind of setting them up for failure, you know? And so, Mary, working with FSDA, what do you see as some of the main ecosystem barriers, gaps, and maybe more optimistically, importantly, the opportunities?
Sure, and I'm going to speak mostly to the financing piece because that's where we've been looking at.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking at it holistically as an ecosystem. I think, of course, we know that there is a painful, shortage of capital available for these startups, especially at that very, very early stage where you all are working. I think the reasons being the ones we know, the perception of risk, the types of capital that are available are not necessarily right for these companies or these startups or these ventures. They're the traditional model of VC, or you have those high debt costs that if they can even access the traditional banking sector. So, and then maybe on the ecosystem side as well, it's also about the skills, the human capacity for their businesses that they need. Are they able to access the right talent, for example? Are they able to, afford the talent that they need to be able to scale and grow their businesses? So those are just some of the challenges. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I like what Hetal was saying about thinking about different types of financing that work specifically for the companies. I think there's an opportunity to reimagine what financing can look like, especially on the continent. I think there's an opportunity as well to kind of focus our talent in the areas that really matter. So in the areas that will have that climate impact that we're trying to see. So being able to direct talent, and I think that's what TECA is doing a lot of when it comes to supporting entrepreneurs in launching and thinking about the challenges and thinking about solutions. There's a lot of opportunity to direct this young human capital that Africa has towards, these sorts of innovations and in these spaces. I think I'll stop there. If I think of any others, I'll add in, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Mary. And I like the point about directing talent, because in the TECA program, we do take on fellows that already come with pre-existing ideas. Some of them also with early stage registered companies, right? They don't necessarily have an MVP or minimum viable product in the market, but a lot of them are passionate individuals that have great ideas, right? And that it's some of the entrepreneurship skills, some of the business model development. But with that, there's so much potential to blossom, right? So I just continuing to speak about the ecosystem. I know I already gave Hetal a really tough question about social change and inequalities. I think I want to give Thando a tough question as well, because it's one thing that as one of the venture builders for TECA, I often get caught up on. And this is the significant policy and regulatory barriers that some of these entrepreneurs face, right? And so, for example, just as a small anecdote, we were working in around or wave one with a particular individual that wanted to start a seaweed company in South Africa by taking some of the seaweed that was washed up but wasn't being used, was decomposing and then emitting different gases, and also could be quite harmful in terms of tourists that might be frequenting those beaches. But it's illegal actually to take that refuse, that seaweed, and so they ended up moving to Kenya, right, which had a different political and regulatory structure. So I'm curious about, from your experiences, Thando, in the blue economy, also recognizing, as you've said, it's a newer a space. How are you seeing policy and regulatory barriers, and also importantly, if you're seeing fellows overcoming them?
Yeah, it is. It's a tough one, but I think it's a tough one for everyone, right? Policy is particularly can be quite a speed bump for most people. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, what I can say, and to be frank about it, is that we all know that policy isn't nearly dynamic enough and changing enough, or even we're not even making policy fast enough to meet the needs that are needed to innovate and to address the challenges we're facing. And so, the best we can do as people in OHA is to continue to put pressure on policymakers that this is needed. but the pace and scale of policy change and making is definitely nowhere near what is needed for us to do the jobs that we're trying to do. So that's the first point that I really do want to make. And really, the best thing that we can do is to continue to put pressure on it. The one thing that I can say is that also with understanding some of the policies, there's also obviously the accompanying regulations that go with it, is having that support of understanding what that policy means and what the day-to-day looks like. And a lot of startups may not understand that from your basic research. And so having the support of like our legal partners who are able to go through some of those regulations and say, okay, this is what you can't do, this is what you can do, this is the workaround, and particularly focusing on the workaround because work needs to be done. And so you have to maybe there's potential to maybe need to shift your business model a little bit to get to a place where you still have that impact and you still for profit and you're still scalable. And so I'd say, although it's not a nice answer really, is that one, it is a difficult speed bump to overcome, and it takes a lot more players in the game with a lot more political agency to have who are not always ready to come to the game and move as fast enough as we need them to, is that we need to encourage our startups to find a workaround around those policies, and also engage with those policymakers to see or to continue to put pressure on them to see if there's an even smaller change that can be made maybe on a day-to-day. The particular example that you made, Tyler, is still intact. That policy has not changed. And this is what I'm saying, is that despite continuous conversation and the continuous obvious solution to opening that up for people to come and harvest washed up kelp, which is, it's just washed up, it's still an ongoing conversation, which is incredibly frustrating. And I need to be frank about that because in South Africa particularly, I don't want to speak for other countries, it can be quite a slow process.
And an expensive process is what I heard as well when we were working with that, is that the issue is that it was more expensive to go through the bureaucratic process of adjusting that legislation than actually hiring the private sector off-taker of the seaweed, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually different, like I guess internal economics that are at play.
Yeah.
And I want to save a call to action for later, but one of the things that I've been thinking about, maybe it is a type of call to action, is that the policy and regulatory structures, especially for the startups, tends to be quite opaque, or their access to knowledge and understanding of those different structures is quite difficult, right? And I'm not sure how well enough we're doing this as an accelerator, incubator, climate innovation community of kind of sharing that knowledge. Because I'm sure somebody that, for example, Hetal has worked with, or you have worked with, Thando, has gone through a similar process of figuring out how to navigate that for a new startup that's coming down the pipeline, right? But even maybe we're not really sharing that well enough. Did you have a thought about that, Thando?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And one of the things that came to mind is we're launching our alumni program for our accelerator. And it was because, and we'll speak to this, but it really is because, it's a platform to share knowledge and experiences of different startups. And this is definitely one of the topics that can come up in our platform, in that, a startup can say, I'm struggling with this thing, or I'm going through this process and I would love some expertise or experiences around that. And so we haven't launched it quite yet. We're in the final stages, but I 100% agree with you in that sharing some of these difficult processes can really speed up someone's experience. It's almost paying it forward to make sure that impact is implemented. So 100% agree with that.
And the synergy potentials are huge, right? If you pass that down to an earlier stage startup, they might be able to benefit your startup later on, right? Just conscious of the time, I did want to return back to this other continuum question that I had from before, is like the entrepreneurship continuum, right? Or their company stage development. And so I wanted to just discuss the relationship between the TECA and OHA type companies to becoming something like a Mercy Corps venture company, in building that type of funding and entrepreneurship continuum. So Hetal, my question for you is just, what does it take for MCV to invest in the types of companies that you're investing in? What are kind of the key criteria?
Yeah, I think for us, as I said, we have some flexibility, but we want to see a product that is solving something that is very much needed. So we want to see demand. We want to see an understanding of the customer. I have been very much looking at things that start customer focus first, not technology focus first. Yes, we're a tech-enabled investor, but the technology is a tool to make the product more efficient, so it can get to people cheaper and faster, not in its own right something. In other markets, yes, it is. People can build technology for the sake of technology or other reasons. They can raise money for it. But what we do, our mandate, and what I value and our core values is really around something that is built for a customer that needed the most. The mass customers on the continent, and we're a global fund, the places where we focus are in the bottom 3 quintiles. So we are still talking about the very underserved customer. And so I think those are the core things. Are you solving a real world problem set? And are you really understanding that customer? If you start from there, then we can help you figure out, we'll look at your product. If it's still a little bit early and rough, it's going to be. We're an early stage investor. We can help you evolve that. We can help you think about market segmentation. We can help you think about expansion, fundraising. But I think, at the core, I want to see that you're looking at something that is very much needed for that consumer.
But just concretely in terms of this stage, how much market traction do they typically have before they join you guys?
As I say, if it's some of these more emerging tech, more higher tech, let's say, or carbon offset or insetting company or others, we're quite open to being in pilot phase. If they're a bit more developed or, in business models that have already been tested, if you're going to send me a B2B e-commerce or an ag tech platform that's production facing, as Gabriel's question earlier around market linkage, then I'm going to expect something a bit more evolved, right? Yeah. You've had proof points earlier, and so you should be able to build on what the market's already learned. And so we do have flexibility, but yeah, and then that when you say traction, others, the thing we haven't talked about, and there's also, of course, what's the valuation and other things that come in. There's the economics and the commercial economics that one has to look at.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a great point. And Thando, I just wanted to also come back to you and ask about what's happening with your startups that you're supporting after they're done with your programming. Are you seeing them reaching the type of readiness for what Hital is describing for MCV or other types of accelerators? And kind of what additional support do they need after the program?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of our startups that have gone through and continue to scale, which we've loved to see, of course. Like I said, for our alumni, when we saw that gap, and you can plant a seed and sort of in a pot plant, and then you can then watch it thrive for a little bit, but then when you have to repot it and there's no real soil or environment that's ready to receive it, it's going to die. And so we recognized that when we started our accelerator program, and so that's why the ecosystem building was particularly important to us, is that when we do support these startups through our accelerator, what is their receiving environment? Do we have an ecosystem of investors, of potential co-founders, of potential expertise, technical officers that will be able to continue the growth of the startup? So besides that ecosystem building that we continuously do, and we continuously give access to our startups, and not only our startups, people who we just make use of our hub, because we see ourselves as a hub, we also then realize the need for this alumni program, because some of them still need that mentoring and cannot secure the mentoring beyond the acceleration program, or they still need to get additional grants or funding or some type of funding. And so that alumni program is something quite new that we're launching. And it is for our alumni to just engage with one another, but also to be able to request certain needs that they have of us, whether it's to connect them with people like Hital or Mary or whoever, that we're able to have a platform where we understand what their needs are post the acceleration. What I do want to say, though, on this program, this alumni program, is that, of course, with the years passing, we can't just continuously support everybody, and so we do have a timeline to it. But we're hoping that with that, as that connection builds, that networking builds, that people essentially become a hub of their own, right? That they start to build their own networks. In a similar breath, early this year, we concluded a program, a Gen Blue program, which essentially really was the handing out of OHA's blueprint to other ESOs, other entrepreneurial support organizations, to replicate what we're doing. Because like I said, there's work to be done in terms of building adaptation for communities and climate change. And we recognize that we can't do that by ourselves. And so expanding that network out of ESOs was also a way of giving us our fellows further support, also geographically, because sometimes maybe it's difficult to get a hold of us down here in Cape Town, but if you have an ESO in Madagascar who's directly linked to us, that network can continue to build and have further reach.
Oh, that's great. I love that model. And your analogy with the repotting of the plant is sticking with me, partially because I'm looking at some plants in my house that really need that. And I'm nervous. I'm nervous that they're going to die during the replanting process. But you're so right. You need to make sure that you have all the conditions that are necessary to give them that space to thrive after, right? Because it's a delicate period of time. There is a question for you in the chat, I believe, Thando, around adaptation with the alumni community, if you want to take a peek at that. And now I think it's a good point to actually open the discussion around how the community thinks that they can help. So the CFAR community members here and beyond. So I'm hoping that Carmen can actually pull up a poll for me about how would you want to get involved in supporting climate innovation? Great. And while people are perhaps responding to this chat just in the last couple of minutes, I would love to give each of the fireside chatters just an opportunity to give a really brief call to action. So based on everything that you've heard people say today, some of these different support categories in the poll, what would be a kind of tweet size call to action for the community? I can see people looking up as they're thinking. Does anyone want to jump in first?
I do, Tyler.
Go ahead, Mary, go for it.
I was going to actually ask you to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing with this latest cohort of, TECA, I guess they're fellows at the moment, but soon to be ventures, and what are some of the innovations you're seeing coming out. But my call to action, just so I don't have to come back here, is to say I'd love to see the community engaging more. I know you're going to do this at the end, but so I'm not trying to take it over, but I'd love to see more of the CFAR members just get engaged with these TECA ventures and with the TECA process as much as possible. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I'll definitely echo that call to action, and then I'll describe some of the TECA fellow companies that are active right now. Hetal or Thando, do you want to have a quick call to action? Hesitant. Thando, go for it.
I'm also hesitant right now.
There's so much to call to action for, right? Maybe Hetal, do you want to go?
I mean, I think my call to action is less about probably people on this call, is more around funders and understanding and defining what we're looking to accomplish, and going through that conversation around what is going to be venture exits, what is venture investable, what are we trying to accomplish when we say climate adaptation. And these are all moving and fast moving parts as we all learn as we go along the way. But I think that will be important to set kind of what we expect to be built. In terms of entrepreneurs and builders, I think it's just more iteration and more action, and being able to keep iterating, moving, and testing what's working, but also being realistic about what you want to build, and that this is a long journey. So is this what you really want to be doing?
That's great. Love that. So some alignments needed there for sure. Thando.
All right. It's maybe leaning into a little bit what Mary said, but it is definitely around the idea of, to build an African economy, I think that as Africans, we need to be less competitive and more, on a collaborative sort of approach to this. We're in too deep and we're too vulnerable. Our backs are up against the wall a little bit with what we're facing in terms of vulnerability to climate change. And so maybe my call to action is to lower the walls a little bit more and to share a lot more. to share the learnings, paying it forward, to see each other build maybe a healthy competition in their efforts to do the work that needs to be done, essentially.
That's great. Love that. Love that. And then I'll put in my really quick call to action, and Mary's already hinted at it. But later on this week, we have the TECA fellows that are doing their pitch day. So right now they're in the genesis phase, meaning that they're doing their teams, getting ready to actually register their companies. And so we'll be selecting 10 companies that will move on to the traction phase. On Thursday and Friday, we're going to have 8 pitches on Thursday, 8 pitches on Friday. So a total of 16 pitches of our best and brightest entrepreneurs that are definitely going to pitch their hearts out. And this provides the opportunity for anybody that wants to join to learn more about these innovations in the green and blue economies, while also providing really critical feedback to those teams so that they can improve. And just for some examples to your question, Mary, we have a nature-based drainage system company that's working on reducing vulnerability for coastal urban communities in Mozambique. There's a really cool Japanese fish drying technique system that's being piloted in Madagascar. We have a briquettes company in Rwanda that's trying to outcompete an existing other briquettes company using a different type of chemical compound. Some cool ice machines, solar-powered ice machines in Tanzania, and then also another one would be dissolvable medical gloves in South Africa, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but it's cool. So I encourage you to explore those. My colleague Carmen's going to share an email with everyone to these pitch days that she'll send right after this. But that's all the time that we have today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Hetal, Mary, Tando, Hannah, Carmen, and everyone else that participated in the chat. And if you have any other further questions, want to stay engaged, you can respond to the email that Carmen will send. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all.
So much.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone.